Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are strapping ourselves into the U-boat and navigating this really fascinating, dense, and well, surprisingly expensive world of miniature ecosystems.
Yeah.
Our source material today comes from the exhaustive notes of a really dedicated hobbyist, someone who just meticulously tracks details across, wildly different fields, from fish keeping to hardcore gardening.
And specifically, within those gardening logs, we find ourselves in the world of terrariums.
Mm.
We're talking about those, totally captivating miniature gardens, sometimes humid, sometimes arid, all these self-contained little worlds inside a glass box.
They're beautiful.
They're aesthetically stunning, scientifically interesting, and they're incredibly popular right now.
Exactly. And that is where our deep dive really begins,
Yeah.
because it brings us to this fundamental paradox that our source flags right away. If you're drawn to building terrariums, you notice almost immediately that the initial setup cost, the cost of the supplies, it's significantly higher than if you were just doing like standard potted gardening.
It's completely counterintuitive. When you look at the supplies, you're using less dirt, less fertilizer, and crucially, much, much smaller plants.
Right.
You'd expect the scale down in materials to just translate directly into a scale down in price. But instead, you end up paying a premium.
So that's the mission today. We need to unpack the underlying economics of this tiny little world. Where is this seemingly unjustifiable price inflation coming from?
Especially for supplies.
Yes. And what's the actionable knowledge for the hobbyist, which, in this case means you, the listener, to avoid this price trap completely?
Because the notes make it really clear. The inflation is most glaring when you're sourcing the essential inputs. So the soil, the decorative bits, and above all, those tiny specialized plants.
Yeah.
Especially when you compare those prices to what a standard, high-volume plant nursery charges. We are talking about the difference between a starter home and a mansion priced identically.
Okay, let's just jump right into the evidence then. We have to start with the specific example from the source, because it's the moment the author's suspicion really turned into a full-blown economic insight.
It's a great piece of comparative sourcing. The author decided to benchmark the price of one specific plant species.
Okay.
One that's really common in tropical terrariums, the rough maidenhair fern.
That's Adiantum hispidulum, for those who like the Latin. And they looked at the price for a single starter plant, a tiny seedling at a specialty terrarium shop.
Right. One located in a very high visibility urban area. And the price they recorded was MYR 22 for a single small seedling of this fern.
Okay, let's pause on that currency for a second. MYR 22. For our global listeners, that's roughly, what, $5 US? 4.5 euros?
Something like that, yeah. Which might not sound like a lot, but you have to keep in mind we're talking about a tiny young plant, maybe just a few inches tall.
And here is the core of the insight. Our source get the comparison. They note that for that exact same price, MYR 22, a typical nursery, one that serves the wider gardening community, would probably offer not a seedling, but a large, fully mature, established fern.
A completely different variety, but a full-grown plant. So you have a situation where this massive, fully rooted plant that's taken maybe months, maybe years to grow,
Right.
It has the exact same price tag as a tiny, vulnerable seedling. That single comparison is just stunning.
It is. It proves the value isn't tied to the biological maturity or even the rarity of the plant.
Not at all.
So that observation is absolutely critical. If the plant isn't rare, and it's definitely not mature, then what is the logic that justifies charging the price of a full specimen for a seedling? Couldn't you argue that growing plants small requires more delicate handling, more specialized labor? Is that what we're paying for?
That's a great question, and intuitively it feels right. But the source suggests that the cost of any specialized labor it's minimal compared to the real driving factor.
Which is?
Retail overhead. The small size of the plant isn't driving the cost. The high cost of the square footage that's selling that plant is.
So we're moving from botany to commercial real estate.
Exactly.
It's a curious case of the expensive seedling. And the explanation is less about cultivation and more about spatial economics.
Precisely. We need to analyze the primary reason given for this premium. The cost inflation, according to our source, is overwhelmingly attributed to increased operational costs.
Costs that are just endemic to the retailer's location.
Yes.
And when we talk operational costs, we're not talking about small expenses. The notes specifically highlight rental and utility costs as the major drivers.
Think about where these specialty terrarium stores are placed. They aren't usually tucked away in some low-rent industrial park.
No, of course not.
To attract the impulse buyer, the design-conscious consumer, they need high-visibility, heavy foot traffic. So they gravitate towards high-end retail locations.
Shopping centers, mixed-use developments.
Or, most commonly, shopping malls.
And we all know what happens when a business signs a lease in a prime mall location. The rent is astronomically higher than, say, a traditional nursery that's sitting on cheap land on the outskirts of town.
Right. The plant itself doesn't care if it's on a shelf in a mall or in a dusty greenhouse. But the retailer has to recoup that extremely high rent. So that cost gets distributed across every single item they sell, no matter how tiny. That little maidenhair fern seedling is effectively paying the mall tax.
It's basically a convenience fee. It's baked into the price of every miniature component.
It is.
You're not just buying a seedling, you're paying for the expertise, the climate-controlled environment, the pretty display, and the ease of access that comes with being located next to a big department store.
It's the price of curated convenience. The consumer is paying a huge premium for a very specific specialist retail experience.
Which leads to a massive markup on what are otherwise commodity inputs.
Totally. The sand, the gravel, the activated carbon, and these small, easy-to-grow plants. The retailer has to charge a price point that reflects the corner lease, not how hard it was to grow the plant.
And that, I think, is the true insight here. It removes the mystery. It's not a scarcity issue, it's a location issue.
Right.
So knowing this, how do we, the enthusiastic learner who loves terrariums, how do we completely sidestep that real estate cost and still build these wonderful little worlds?
This is where the source gives us the key supply chain hack. It's a simple two-part strategy. It's designed to maximize the knowledge you get from the specialty shop while minimizing the financial cost.
Okay, step one. It's mandatory, and it's all about preparation. You have to thoroughly identify all the plants, soils, and materials you need for your build.
Use the high-end specialty store for research and inspiration.
But not for the actual transaction.
Exactly. Note the species names, the specific substrate components, the exact type of decorative rock you want. Get all that information.
Knowledge is power.
It is. And once you have that detailed shopping list, step 2 becomes incredibly powerful. You deliberately bypass those dedicated, high-rent specialty shops. You take your knowledge and apply it somewhere else.
To a different, lower overhead retail environment. Now, obviously, the first stop is the regular plant nursery. That's going to save you a huge amount on the plants and the general potting mix. They sell in volume, not for curation.
For sure.
But the notes go further, and they offer this truly surprising, genuinely exciting detail about where the rest of the materials can be found.
This is where the author's dual expertise in gardening and fish keeping really pays off.
Yeah.
The source suggests looking even further afield. It states that necessary specific components, things like substrate layers, certain drainage materials, even decorative rocks, can be acquired at a fraction of the cost at fish stores.
A fish store.
Yeah.
That is a phenomenal connection. I would have never, ever thought to look for my terrarium supplies in an aquatic shop.
Well, what's so fascinating is that it perfectly illustrates that many supplies for a closed terrestrial environment are functionally identical to those needed for a stable aquatic one.
Oh.
I mean, think about what a terrarium needs. Drainage, filtration, a specific soil structure, aeration.
And what does a high-end aquarium need?
Exactly the same things. They need substrate layers, often with activated carbon for filtration and odor control. They need specific grades of sand and gravel for structure. They need certain inert rock types.
And the fish-keeping market is massive.
It's huge. And those commodity inputs are often bought in large volumes at wholesale prices.
So you go to the specialty terrarium shop, and you buy a tiny branded bag of terrarium-activated carbon for, say, $10.
Right.
But then you go to the fish store, and you buy a huge tub of aquarium filter carbon for half the price.
Oh.
And it's the exact same chemical product.
It's just a generic input that's been repurposed and repackaged for the terrarium niche.
That's strategic procurement at its best.
It is. Because fish stores often deal in much higher volumes of these generic inputs, or because they aren't bound by the same extreme high street rental costs as the specialized mall shops, they can sell them at a far lower price point.
So what does the source say?
The source notes that by simply using these alternative sources, the regular nurseries and the fish stores, the hobbyist can get virtually all the necessary components at a substantially reduced price.
That is the ultimate actionable takeaway from this whole deep dive. Understanding that the retail price is driven by the cost of the real estate, not the rarity of the item, immediately empowers you. It turns what feels like an expensive luxury hobby into a strategic procurement exercise, where just smart shopping wins the day.
Precisely. We started with this confusing fact that small plants cost the same as large ones. We've extracted the knowledge that this premium is primarily due to specialized storefronts in high-traffic, high-rent areas.
Which just massively inflates their operational costs.
Right. And the solution is clear. Use the experts for education, but use the high-volume, low-overhead retailers for acquisition.
You don't have to pay a convenience premium if you know where the exact same commodity components are already being sold cheaply under a different name.
Whether that's at a regular nursery or, thanks to our source, an aquarium supply house.
This knowledge really extends far beyond gardening, though.
It does. The source author logs extensive notes on both gardening and fish keeping and clearly sees the supply chain synergies. If materials for a miniature garden can be found cheaply at a fish store, then we have to ask a bigger question.
What other hobby materials sold at a staggering premium in these highly specialized retail settings might be hiding in plain sight?
Exactly.
Think about that the next time you're browsing. If you're a painter using specialty pigments, maybe your cheaper source is the automotive paint aisle. If you're a miniaturist buying tiny bits of wood or specialized glue, maybe the high-volume discount hardware store is selling the exact same product, unbranded, for less.
The premium often just covers the specialty shop's rent, not the item's true value. It forces you to look at every item, not by its intended use, but by its core chemical or material composition.
That's the power of this knowledge.
Your next big hobby savings might be found in a completely different, high-volume retail setting.
A truly fantastic thought to mull over. It changes how you approach every consumer purchase. That was the deep dive into terrarium economics. We'll see you next time.